We are live with another episode of the AWE podcast. I'm here as always with my colleague, partner, podcast host, Christian Dominique. Christian, how are you doing today?
Very good. And you, Mark?
Doing very, very well. We have a very interesting topic for today's podcast, which is why energy management beats time management. That might seem a little confusing to a lot of people. What does energy have to do with time management? But it actually has to do a lot. As one of my mentors once told me, Tony Robbins, he said that where focus goes, energy flows. So if you don't understand how to manage your energy, time can just seem to go by rather quickly, and you lose track of time and you lose track of your life, essentially, right? Because at the end of the day, our life becomes that which we pay attention to. What do you have to think about that, Christian?
Yes, so there is this idea that, time blocking and scheduling can become more and more efficient. Um, Unfortunately, it works to a certain degree, yet it's more important to focus on understanding our body and our mind and to know when we're in the flow state, as we talked about, the psychological concept of the flow state, when things become easy and time disappears and you're able to be the most productive, right? So, um, first of all, we now know that it's not about the amount of time that you're working, it's about how focused. We talked about attention and how a lot of things distract us, right? So, how can you lower your cognitive load for things that are distraction and keep it focused on what really matters, how you can contribute to the world? Might it be a business or family or art? And it's really about managing and balancing that time.
Absolutely. And I think that people might feel more productive with a really packed calendar or, this whole hustle culture, productivity culture. But even if you have a really full calendar, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're getting a lot done, right? If we have a lot of things to do, but our attention is distributed and our energy is all over the place, you can have one of the least productive days, essentially, even though on the surface it seems like you're really productive. But if you perhaps tone down the number of things you're doing and you say, okay, I'm going to do this one thing today, but I'm just going to give it all my energy possible, right? You might have a very, very, very productive day and compared to the first option, right? So time isn't the issue here, energy is. And it seems that we've walked into a sort of world where our energy is just being sapped by distractions and uh, advertisers, and it's a huge commodity on top of attention.
Agreed. And when we talk about energy, there's many ways, right? So, and there's even the philosophical ways of energy fields and what is energy. But we want to really define energy as your capacity to be productive cognitively and physically at a task. And in that capacity, in that definition, we know that there are some hormones and neurochemicals in our body that will help us get more or less energy, right? So, for instance, we know that cortisol is linked with energy levels, and reversely at night, melatonin helps you calm down and sleep, right? So you have less energy. And we know that at the beginning of the day, healthy individuals have a rise in cortisol at the beginning of their. Actually, it's starting just a bit before you wake up, and then rises, and then will slowly go down during the day. So being aware of those things and being aware of your body and your mind will allow you to manage your energy better, not just your time. And talking about early morning, so a lot of people have early morning routines because you have more cortisol and energy in the morning. And I also did with my Japanese friend who unfortunately had a burnout and had to change his life around, understanding that working too much was going to probably kill him or make him very ill. He had a Monday morning breakfast routine, which was working from 6 to 8 a.m., and then having half hour to chat with the partner or the people that you want to do this routine with. And that allowed you to have 2 hours of focus at the beginning of the week, and sometimes you could do as much as 2 days work in 2 hours before the week starts, right?
What do you think burnout actually is from a scientific perspective? I think it's something that a lot of people are dealing with nowadays.
Well, we have a burnout quiz on our website. If you think you might be experiencing that, at awedigitalwellness.com, you can check that out. We put some thought into it. So there is some different factors that will qualify as a burnout. I just had a call yesterday with our Indian colleague and potential new guest in the podcast in February that was mentioning that he had a burnout working as the head of Google in India. And, he became also clinically depressed. So burnout is when you don't have that energy, actually, right? So it's when you feel that every extra task or email is bothersome. You start to have less good connections with your colleagues, and you're not really motivated to work, right? So that's affects you, affects your colleagues, maybe affects your family, your health. So those are
Mhm.
very important things to consider when we don't manage our energy. We are, and myself this week actually, I had a 22-hour day of work pretty much, and then I wasn't thinking clearly at the end, and I was able to send an email to someone saying, actually, I'm too tired. I will respond tomorrow, right? And it's kind of those things of knowing that, if you send that email, that extra email that you wanted to, but your energy level is not there,
Mm,
you're not doing yourself or others a service.
mm. This can become difficult when people have deadlines and they find themselves at the end of the day and they just haven't done the work that's required, and they still have to stay up late into the night knowing that their energy is depleted and they're not perhaps in the best state to get things done. What would you say to somebody who feels like there just isn't enough time in the day?
Um, there is the same amount of time every day, pretty much. And
Mhm.
we have to understand that there is a limit of what we can do in a day. And you can find efficiencies in tools and ways of working, uh, but to realize that your energy is precious and it is the commodity, it's not time.
Correct.
And you're able to work better, more efficiently if you're aware of your energy level across the day. And that will improve all the aspects that we talked about.
So one of the biggest lies modern leadership bought into is this idea that if you manage your hours better, everything will just work out. And I think many people can agree this is just not true. But leadership doesn't usually happen on a spreadsheet. It happens in conversations, decisions, pressure moments, and those are moments are often energy dependent. They're not time dependent. So a lot of it has to do with the perception of what an event means to you rather than the amount of time it will take to get a task done, but how excited you will feel, for example, when you get the task done. But we often just fall into this fear response that somehow has been conditioned into us. So what we want to do is shift the conversation away from productivity hacks and towards something more fundamental, which is our capacity, perhaps, to overcome difficult obstacles, challenges, uh, by changing the way that we perceive these events. So the real question isn't how much time do we actually have, it's what state are you in when you show up? So you can have an empty calendar and still be ineffective, and you can have a full calendar and still be deeply impactful, but your energy needs to be regulated throughout all this. So one of the things that I do when I find myself uh, having difficulty focusing, for example, and I learned this from a Tony Robbins conference, is that um, I often have to just get up, start jumping, listen to some music, remind myself of what it is that I'm working towards. Because I think when we're working long hours, the goals can just get lost in the mix and we forget why we're even showing up in the first place. What's the purpose? What's the big why, right? And it's important that we remind ourselves, and you have to get yourself into state before you can actually approach the task again. It's really,
Yeah.
it's more so physiology, and physiology directly impacts your psychology.
Well, of course, that's some of the things that we incorporate on our resets. So we have free digital resets available on our website again, and we're also doing some resets for the corporate world, right? So we're looking at enabling teams and individuals to have that better balance of energy. You talked about nervous system regulation, physiology, right? So we are neuroscientists and we've developed some of those tools for people to be more aware and to incorporate that in their week and in their days, right? So it's the ability to create the right mental and physical state to manage that energy.
Absolutely.
You talked also about meaning, right? So motivation and meaning, and one of my pillars of happiness is purpose, right? So we want to also remind people that you will have more energy if there's a purpose in what you're doing. If what you think is you're doing is purposeless or meaningless or has low value, you're not really contributing to the society, then it might be difficult for you to engage in that way.
100%. So I think purpose is the thing that gets a lot of people out of bed in the morning, whether it's feeding the family or trying to change the world in some way. It has to be deeply meaningful, and not in a sort of way where you repeat a mantra 5 times in the mirror, but that you actually go out, gather evidence, and see yourself being successful at attaining that thing that you find meaningful. So what we're seeing, we talked about leadership last week, but we're seeing leaders, when it comes to time management, at least, optimize hours while silently draining their nervous systems. And so the output might look impressive, but the judgment, patience, creativity, and presence are collapsing on top of each other. And so here's the key insight in all of this is that depletion doesn't announce itself loudly. It shows up subtly: shorter tempers, rigid thinking, reactive decisions, and just being more reactive in general, right? So I know we always talk about AI on this podcast, but AI is, it is saving time, but it's also increasing cognitive load because perhaps the expectations are higher. A tide raises all boats are raised by the same tide. So we're processing more inputs faster with less recovery, but there's just much more expected of us.
Yeah, the
So
response time for average employees now, and you can think back of when we still had landline telephones, and customers would wait a week to respond to get something or a fax or the emails now are normally people expect you to respond the same day, and then you have like other tools, and you have your cell phone, your smartphone, so you're working, you're always expected to be available, and that's not the best way to think. You've probably also heard of the book The 4 Hour Week, right? And it's like, well, and I've been doing this for a long time. Like, read your emails in batches, don't read them as they come along, and then you're more efficient, and you're not going from multitasking, which we know doesn't really work and adds to this distress and energy depletion. So yeah, those are also some of the tools that we can share on this podcast today, and perhaps we can talk a little bit about some related science that we found. Any interesting article that you found on the subject, Mark?
Yeah, I was about to reference an article by Mark and Soper. I didn't include this screenshot for it, but they just showed that automation without regulation doesn't create freedom. It actually accelerates burnout. Key finding. They looked at a group of medical students and found that those who were using ChatGPT to maybe make their work easier in the short term were they were finding themselves competing much more with other students who are also using it, and that caused more burnout in those students. So short-term freedom, but long-term pain was and greater burnout levels.
Very
What about you?
And
Did you
what
find
year was
anything?
that?
That was 2018 and 2022.
Great.
2022 was the one where they were looking at the effect of ChatGPT. I think this is right when it came out.
Great. Yes, I was reading earlier this week also some AI related papers, but we'll save that for another discussion. Today I brought a paper talking about Energide. So going a bit back to the biology, we talked about cortisol. So if you go in the cellular context, then we can talk about how much information can be handled in the CNS, so the central nervous system. This is an article in Basic Neuroscience and 2009, as you can see on the screen. And just to explain a little bit what we found, I found it's an interesting article in general, and it talks about the concept of Energide, which is different than what biology was looking at before. We can go to the next part, and I found this interesting idea that firstly there was something called the internal milieu that said that all the cells live together, but really we can now conceive the importance of another framework, which is called Energide, and they have the cellular interior, but also it's a more broadly defined construct that we know now that certain types of stress are acting on those energites, and that's kind of the key to figuring out how the energy is being generated and efficiently or not in the cells, right? So those are all cells in the body, including your neurons, and that's an interesting concept to understand. And so it talks about how multicellular organisms like us are able to maintain health state, right? And for the neurons, healthy neurons, healthy brain is what we're trying to promote, right? So just wanted to share a little bit of the biology, and then I found another article that was a little bit more linked to obesity. This one's in the psychiatric clinics. It's called The Regulation of Energy Balance, again by the CNS, central nervous system. And it talks about how obesity is linked with mental health or bad mental health outcomes. So again, when we think about the holistic approach of energy, and everything we do at all is about holistic systemic thinking, we talked about nutrition affecting here in the case of obesity, but it can also be the type of food and when you're eating, right? So there's other articles about fasting and intermittent fasting that shows that can increase resilience, can increase focus. I've been doing mostly intermittent fasting for 2 years now, and find my energy level increase by that, my attention increase by that. And this article talks about obesity and how that changes your central nervous system with different modalities that will help, or in this case, not help regulate your energy balance.
Very interesting. So what are your thoughts on so Energide is the entire system that is comprising your energy management? How would you?
Exactly. So we know for a long time that the mitochondria and the ATP system is actually what the ATP molecule is what carries energy in the cells. And now we're finding that this energized concept allows us to understand better the energy management. That's why it's called energized, actually.
Interesting. Have you heard of the concept? I mean, I know you have decision fatigue, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah, so basically, posit that decision quality drops as mental energy drops, and it's also been replicated across judges, physicians, and executives. So, the study by, and I'm sure many people have heard of this, study by Danziger in 2011 showed that judges give harsher rulings later in the day, right, when the energy depletes. Physicians make more errors when cognitively depleted. That was a study by Linder in 2014. So if for a lot of people, especially leaders who might be watching, leadership is decision making and depletion erodes decisions. I just spoke with a client actually about this exact topic today. And he said, later in the day, I find it really difficult and I start to procrastinate and not make decisions. And it's, yeah, you're mentally and emotionally depleted. So I said to him, all the important decisions, whether that's for work or family, try to make that decision earliest in the morning when you can. Execute that around early afternoon. It can be explained through a purely biological perspective. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I've heard and even referenced that study about the judges, right? So, yeah, if you're just before lunch, or you don't have the good amount of energy, which is what we're talking about today, you will make poor decisions. You will be harsher. You'll be more irritable. So you'll send people to jail longer, basically, right?
Exactly.
But in other cases, you can be a doctor, and you might have patients die or not have the best healthcare, or whatever profession you're doing. We know that the energy will affect the quality of your work, right? And of your decision, of your brain.
100%. And from a neuroscience perspective, it's a lot of it has to do with autonomic regulation. If you're chronically sympathetic, meaning that you're always on, you're always in the reactive state, your prefrontal cortex essentially goes offline. And so this creates stress on the long term. Stress impairs executive function and emotional regulation. There was another study by Arnsten in 2009 that demonstrated this. And when the prefrontal cortex is offline, leadership or just work in general becomes impulsive, rigid, or avoidant. Right? So that is why burnout and energy regulation are closely tied to each other.
Very good points, Mark. And to conceive of this as like, don't make decisions when you're angry, or right. So don't make decisions when you're hungry as well, or hangry.
Important decisions.
Yes.
Still got to decide where to eat. But yeah, I mean, when energy drops, three things usually happen. Decision quality drops, emotional reactivity increases, relational trust erodes. And so you tend to just snap at your team, and that's not a personality flaw, it's physiology, right? So lots of other studies, Maslach and Leiter in 2016 found that burnout strongly correlates with reduced empathy and increased cynicism. Kuchaki and Desai, 2015, leaders under chronic stress are perceived as less trustworthy, right? So it's not just the impact that it has on your decisions, but it's how you're perceived by your colleagues as well, that it ultimately impacts. It's a two-way street here.
Yeah. And, if we want to be a little bit more specific on what can drain your energy, you can ask yourself, like, what's one task that drains your energy no matter how much time you give it, right? So what are the tasks that maybe you don't have that meaning or purpose, and you feel tedious, or it drains your energy, or you're an introvert and you've had too many meetings, or too many people to see. So what are those things that drains, and also what are the things that that are increasing your energy, and how can you balance your day in days and weeks to have that good balance, right?
Yeah, and I think something as simple as going for a walk can help restore energy if you're feeling like you just can't focus anymore. Getting up, doing a little dance, listening to music, going for a walk, going to the gym, all that stuff. If you want to like see an impact here, super important. So there's another study by Roenberg in 2012 that showed that chronobiology, so i.e., your circadian rhythm, and the research there shows that aligning work with peak energy windows improves performance and reduces errors. A lot of people that you meet, they'll say, yeah, until 12 p.m., that's my prime time for making decisions, right? So if you know that, then delegate your tasks that are maybe very tedious and to somebody else during that time, and focus on tasks that are going to involve a lot of decision making.
High impact strategic tasks, and
100%.
also to understand that yes, you can delegate some tasks, and some tasks you need to do, and if they're draining your energy, I think we talked about this in another podcast, like some tedious tasks like filing taxes or doing some tedious lists. You can find ways to motivate yourself by looking at the outcome and feeling the outcome right now. So kind of future looking and imagining as you're doing the test the value that you're creating by finishing and not procrastinating. Some of the other tricks, like you mentioned, you're doing a tedious task, put some music on, right? Music. There's a lot of studies, and I talk about this also in my books about how music enhance cognition, increase creativity, and it could be just listening to some of your favorite music, whatever that is. We won't judge your music choices. And then also playing music. If you're able to play an instrument or to sing in the shower or whatever it is that you want to express musically, it also shows increased attention.
100%. Yeah, I think just the musicality and getting into state, all these things, they have direct impacts on your physiology, right? So I think that people who learn how to regulate their energy and they learn the peak states for energy, they often learn to take advantage of their own biology rather than feel like it's working against them.
Exactly, Mark.
Yeah. So as I said before, your emotional state, your energy state can directly affect the people that you work with. And if you think that, maybe this isn't so important, well, think about the direct impact it has on your family, on your team members, on the people who are around you. And that can be a very compelling reason to take this seriously then.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And we talked also about nature, awe. We know very well the psychology and neuroscience, and also physiology of awe. Awe states also increase your cytokines, so your immune system. So it's all linked, right? And we try to create awe in the world with our awe digital wellness company, but also with our tools, with the reset, and inside the company to make sure that we can also laugh, right? Mark and I laughed a lot in meetings and also on the podcast sometimes. And we had a nice collage of all the laughs we had last year in our yearly recap. Laughter is also something that will increase your energy, right? Smiling, some simple stuff.
Smiling makes a huge difference.
And we don't suggest you doom scroll some meme videos for laughing. Laugh with a real person. Go and bother someone and make a joke, and that's probably going to be better.
100%. So another scientific study that I found, shows that in the neuroscience, when stress hormones like cortisol stay elevated, the brain literally shifts control away from the prefrontal cortex, the exact area that is responsible for judgment, empathy, and long-term thinking, right? And it steers it more towards reactive survival circuits, right? And when people are in this state, it's just so much more difficult to actually focus on tasks that are essential and important for the team, because you're not you're not goal oriented, you're more in a reactive state.
Yeah, and we also talked about finding the way to respond and not react, right? And that's why this is the calm month at awe, and
Mhm.
trying to explain that these pauses, this time in between thoughts, these times in between meetings, right? Some people have meetings back to back to back, and that might work for a while, but maybe you need a pause between some meetings. Maybe you need to plan that so that your energy level stays up, right?
I think a good question to ask yourself is, when you overreact, or it's not like, why did I react that way? The question that you should ask yourself is, what state was I in when I reacted? What state was I in when I reacted? That's the essential question, because then you can look for patterns. When you look for patterns, you can start finding triggers, and triggers will tell you, like, they give you predictable ways to look at your own behavior.
Well, it is true, and the more again, awe, the first part of awe is the acronym AWE is awareness, right? So
Hmm.
when we talk about energy management, and I've talked about this to many people, including in previous podcasts, energy will only be useful for you if you're aware of it, right? And
100%.
like you said, so what are the warning signs? When do you know that you're making a bad decision, right? So coming back to my example earlier this week with my long day, I told someone, that I will respond the next day because the previous email was starting to be bad. Like, okay, now it's time to table the things for tomorrow, right? But that comes from awareness, right? It comes from you being able to say, well, I might not be in the best place to make judgments, um, and aware also of how your body feels, how your mind feels, and things.
Absolutely. So maybe if people still don't really understand the point that we are getting at here, imagine that there's two leaders with identical calendars. They have the same number of meetings, same deadline, same team, but one is regulated, rested, and grounded. The other one is depleted, overstimulated, perhaps doom scrolling a little bit, and running on caffeine and urgency. Both of those have 24 hours in the day, and but they both have radically different outcomes. One listens, the other interrupts. One makes fewer but better decisions. The other makes more decisions and perhaps regrets half of them, right? So this study by Danziger and also another study by Baumeister in 1998, they attribute this directly to decision fatigue, right? Which
Mm.
leads to impulsive short-term choices. And that's why time is a misleading variable and energy is the multiplier here. So much more important. And I think I've spoken with a number of leaders who come to me saying, I'm busy all day and somehow nothing important got done. And that's usually a sign of reactive energy. When energy is low, the brain seeks relief, not impact. So you default to email, Slack, meetings, things that feel productive but don't require depth, really. So
Mm.
another study by Kurzban in 2013 stated that under cognitive fatigue, humans prefer low effort, high stimulus tasks. Repetitive energy mismanagement will lead to cognitive fatigue, which will perhaps lead to the seeking of these things like Instagram, YouTube, Reddit, TikTok, all these highly stimulating devices, which are just ways to distract yourself from the more
Noise.
meaningful.
Yeah.
100%. So productivity becomes performative. It looks good, it feels busy, but it avoids the work that actually matters.
Thanks for sharing, Mark. Very good insights. And as we have on our Friday podcast, we are live, as you know. If you're watching this later, then that's also good. Reach out to us. But now is the time for the first Q&A, and you can always
Mhm.
chat in all the channels that we're live in. If you have any questions or comments, how is your energy management going so far? How could it be better? Do you have any tricks? We talked about a few of them already. Do you have some others that you want to share? And if you have questions for Mark and me, we'll have a Q&A section. Oh, we do have a few. So I want to study, but I'm not able to study earlier. My main goal was to crack the exam. That has changed, but I want to do something else. I want to study, but I'm not able to study.
I think it's the same
Yeah.
question.
So I want to ask you something.
Sir, I'm a student.
Okay. So you want to go first? I want to study, but not able
So,
to. Something else is
so
bothering this person.
I want to study, but I'm not able to study. Earlier, my main goal was to crack the exam, which probably passed the exam. That's changed it, but I want to do something else. So it sounds like he wants to study, but he's not able to study. The goals, so now he doesn't want to pass the exam. Else, um, the question I would ask is, why has the goal changed? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Was the goal to finish the exam, and then all of a sudden you didn't want to finish the exam? Perhaps that could be why it was difficult to study. A lot of people find it difficult to study because they don't really see the reason they're studying in the first place. It's not really tangible to them, like why they're studying. It just feels like effort. So I would find your big why, like why are you studying in the first place? Why do you need to pass that exam? And create that narrative, create that story for yourself.
Thanks, Mark. I can add, around the same subject, right? So we talked about purpose and meaning, right? So what is that exam? Cracking that exam. Can you visualize it now while you're doing it, and being motivated that I'm gonna really, kill it. It's gonna be an amazing exam. I'm gonna get a good grade. I'm gonna feel good. And you can also imagine, because we know that unfortunately sometimes negative motivation is better than positive. We suggest, and we're using positive psychology in most of everything that you do. But if it's very difficult, you can also say, what would I look like if I don't do the exam? And then I said I had the time to study, and we talked about time, but I didn't have the right energy or mindset, right? And then how does that affect you visualizing you failing? And it's not also, to make you fear that I'm a failure. It's not, you don't have to identify to that potential failure, fail the exam, or didn't do as well as I wanted to, but more to say there's two choices. And if I want to get there, what's the journey that I need to go to the better outcome, right? There is no good or bad in the world in terms of philosophy. We're just here, we're aware, but we want to achieve some outcomes, right? So that's why we wake up and we have a purpose, right? And then if you're in psychology, we say adaptive or maladaptive. Is your behavior adaptive to your goals or your purpose, or is it maladaptive? And then if you want to change the behavior, Mark said it first, maybe change your goal. And then as we're talking today, what other things can change your energy, right? So do you need a nap right now, right? Sometimes you need a nap. Do you need to go out? Do you need to eat? What's the energy? And we also know if you eat too much or if you eat at a certain time, that's why fasting and intermittent fasting actually increase your energy, because after you eat, then you need to digest. And when you're in the rest and digest phase, then you have a lower level of energy, right? So, all those things can be considered. And thanks a lot for the question. Hope that was helpful. Lexan ID that asked us that beautiful question. And good luck for your exam. I think that you'll crack it if you get to it.
Yeah. Crack the exam. So maybe we can talk a little bit about trust for a second, right? And a lot of times when we're talking about these digital dispersed teams, they don't necessarily lose trust because leaders are imperfect. They lose trust because leaders are inconsistent. And inconsistency is often an energy issue, not a values issue. Because when you're regulated, you're patient. When you're depleted, you're sharp, dismissive, or rushed, right? So another study by Porcelli and Delgado in 2009 showed that stress reduces emotional regulation and increases negative bias. So you have the same leader, but different energy. The team experiences that as unpredictability, and unpredictability erodes trust.
Very good point. I was reading a book last week, and I posted a few LinkedIn posts on the courage to be happy, which
Hmm.
talks about Alderian psychology. You can check out my post on LinkedIn, Christian Dominique QUE. And to sum it up, there's a lot in that book and a lot of great stuff. But one of the things that I liked was their definition. It's a Japanese duo that wrote the book, and they have studied Alfred Adler, a psychologist and philosopher, German speaker,
Mm.
um, that I think was from Vienna 100 years ago. And one of his he talked about trust, and he talks about respect, right? And his definition of respect is very close to, so personally, I don't like the word love, I don't like the word respect. I think they're overused. I think people use the word love as an emotional feeling, where love can be more of an action than a feeling.
Mm.
Um, and in terms of respect, I think that people always say that they need to be feel respected, and the boundaries, and but it's very subjective, right? So
Mhm.
his definition of respect, I finally found one that I like, and he talks about respect being seeing someone for who they are,
Mm.
and kind of appreciating. So it's really close to my 4 A's framework of awareness. So you're aware of them, then you accept them, acceptance for who they are, and then you even appreciate them just for that, right? So that's pretty much three of my 4 A's framework in that definition of respect. And respect, going back to what you're talking about, trust, right? So when someone feels heard and seen, and you're not ascribing judgment, so you're there, supportive, listening, understanding, not judging, then that's how you can also create and maintain trust.
Being supportive, listening, and not judging.
Yeah.
Hmm. Very interesting. So, building trust is highly influential and important in energy management. And we have to understand that where people misunderstand energy management is when they think that doing less, slowing down, lowering their standards uh, means less, but it doesn't necessarily. It means doing the right things in the right states. So there was, I think, a sports science article by Kelman in 2010 that showed that elite performers don't train more hours, they recover better. So leadership is no different. Recovery isn't the opposite of performance, it's the precondition to it, essentially.
Mhm.
So make sure to understand that when your system is depleted, you, the system overall performs worse, but you have to find a way to get a healthy number of hours of sleep, recover, eat well, and prioritize your energy management here.
Exactly. And we talked about many things that can help your energy, um, social interaction as well, right? So talked about nature, but
Yes.
sometimes, and especially remote workers might have more difficulty, right? They're at home in front of the screens, maybe going through documents, emails, maybe having a few meetings. Um, but to have, and Adler talked also about this, and he calls it um, the interest of community, right? So when you have that feeling of, it's called community feeling, it's translated from German. When
Mm.
you have that feeling of the community interest, so it means that you're not only worried about me, the
Mhm.
ego, you're kind of caring about us. It could be a couple, a family, it could be a company, but it could be the community at large. And thanks, Mark, for helping create this community at All Digital Wellness, which is growing, and a lot of great supporters. Thank you all for listening. We are here to also tell you that this community, this fact that we're talking, you're listening, you're giving questions, this interaction also will bring you back more energy.
Thank you so much as well, Christian. And I think you've been really a great role model for energy management leadership, and you've helped create a wonderful community. Anyone who's listening, feel free to check out our website. On Tuesdays, we do offer a free digital reset that's available to everyone. And look at our website for a lot of more resources. If you have a lot of trouble translating these insights into action, we do offer some tools like our All Smarter Phone, also available on our website. Fill out the form and you can learn more and get in touch with us then as well. Any last comments, Christian?
Yeah, we have some tools, some resets. As mentioned, we're also helping HR leaders. So if you're an HR leader or director and want to inquire about what we can do for your organizations, bring back that community feeling, that calm, increase energy, motivation, meaning throughout the organization, because we know that good energy and good vibes are contagious, and bad apples and bad vibes are also contagious, right? So
Yeah.
we want to be preventive in our approach to help people, families, and companies by giving them the tools before it becomes like my friend burned out, like the other person that I met this week burned out, like many people that we know that get to that point of depletion because they did not consider all the things that we talked about today about energy. And yes, feel free to reach out to us directly to try some of our tools. We also have our AI coach for happiness. Might not be as friendly as Mark and myself, but if you cannot reach us and we're busy, the AI is there for you all the time. It is not a therapist. It is an ethical AI with evidence-based tools to help you ask some of those questions like we had on the chat. So it's Lumi on our website. Please go check it out. You can interact with it and ask questions. And yeah, any final thoughts, Mark?
Anybody watching this, try to develop like a routine of understanding what times of the day do you have peak energy. You can even just track this on your own. Look up, hey, you keep an Excel spreadsheet of when you feel nervous, when do you feel excited, when do you feel like peak cognitive state, and then use this to your advantage. Use this to your advantage.
And one last thing about the flow state or peak cognitive state, right? We've done quite a bit of research on that, and if you want to look, there's tons of research on flow. I really love that concept, and there's some neuroscience that shows what the brain looks like on flow, and there's some more subjective appraisal of what flow looks like. Again, it's when you feel timeless and that you're at your peak performance, right? And that can be for athletes, for creators, and for human beings in general. All our brains are able to have flow. And when we talk about time management, a lot of people talk about techniques like the Pomodoro technique, right?
Yep.
Which was very popular, still is. And one of our interns was going to write a blog on this, and I think there's still a blog on our website. And I kind of guided her to not talk about the Pomodoro technique, but talk about the Flowmodoro technique, which is incorporating flow. So instead of having a time base, after 20 minutes, I take 5 minutes, or after 25 minutes, I take 5 minutes. That's more arbitrary than after I feel out of my flow state, then I take X amount of time and I get back into my flow state, right? So it's very different concept, and it's about energy management.
100%. Well, it was a pleasure, Christian. Thanks so much again for this wonderful episode. We will be back again next Friday. Do we already know what topic we're speaking about next Friday?
Comtech for real life. Design
for real life.
Works. So that's our first. No, it's the last of January, and it might be on Thursdays. So keep a look for the announcement. But we'll be back for you next week. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for the marketing team. Thanks for everyone that joined in live and the ones that are listening later. And as always, thank you so much, Mark, for this wonderful discussion.